1, 2, 3, 4.
Today we are looking at the newest shape from Grain Theory. It's the GT-2. They released their first shape, the GT-1, about 7 years ago, so this is a long time in the making. I'm excited to see what they have. I was gonna have coffee for this video because, you know, it's a Grain Theory, so it seemed kind of fitting, but it's 9 o'clock at night and I'm not that dedicated. So let's get into it. Inside we have got a lot of bubble wrap, Kendama, a couple stickers, and that's it. So let's take out this bubble wrap thing. Here we have the GT-2, comes in this nice drawstring bag. It's your standard drawstring bag. You've seen it before, it's not new. But it does have the new GT-2 logo on it, which is pretty cool. So what I'm hoping we get from this is kind of a GT-1, but just updated. I really hope they didn't try to like make anything too large, like proportion-wise. Like, the GT-1 was still a good shape, and honestly, I didn't feel like they needed to change it up until about last year, and that is 6 years, which is a lot longer than most other Dama companies. So I kind of hope they stuck with that formula, and I hope this is good enough to last another 7 years, but we're gonna find out. And there it is. Wow. So there's the Dama, and I believe, oh, you get a Grain Theory button, and a clump of string. There we go. Well, there's 2 bearing beads, so I'm guessing this is just 2 strings put together. Yes, okay, cool. So you get 2 black strings and 2 bearing beads, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's nice. So the one I have here is the only one they've made so far, and it's a maple Ken with a raw ash Tama made in the USA, which is pretty cool, but it also explains the price tag. This was $95. Now looking at the Tama, because that's where I'm going to start stringing it from, this is a 61mm ash Tama, I believe, and also it has a pretty wide 21mm bevel. It's not crazy wide, but it's definitely bigger and nice and modern, so it's going to be very similar to like a Soul All-Star bevel or anything you get from like a Sweets Boost. Pretty similar to that, so it's a nice modern bevel. The design is also very clean on the Tama. It's just these 3 horizontal lines going across, kind of making it a half split, so it's still pretty good for tracking. And also at the top of the string hole, you have the Grain Theory caliper logo burned in, which I really like. I love seeing that little extra touch, so yeah, big fan of that. So when you take apart the Ken, that's loud, you also get a little caliper logo burnt in here right next to the string hole. Okay, so now that we have this all strung up and put together, I just did it at the maximum length of string so we can see what it comes with, and it's huge. So it comes with a very nice long string, which is awesome, so you can trim it up to your liking. I don't think anyone plays with this long. Maybe. This is probably like a 10 to 15 finger string length. I'll say a 10. This is a 10 finger string. So first impressions, this feels really nice. It's kind of what I was talking about, how it is reminiscent of a GT-1, but it's definitely bumped up. So looking at it, you can kind of see it still has this swoop here in the bottom of the Ken, which is kind of like a Grain Theory signature look. They kind of came up with it, and it's awesome, and I'm glad to see it's still on the GT-2. And it does really kind of look like a GT-1, just bigger, which is pretty nice. The main thing you will kind of see off the bat too is that the stall points on the cups are huge. They're massively bumped up, and I think they're the biggest on any kendama I've ever seen. I think it'll really add a lot of contact for birds, so this Ken will be really nice for stalls, and I think that's an awesome addition. As far as wood burns on the Ken go, you really only have one, which is kind of cool. It's very minimal, but it's the Roman numeral 2 underneath the small cup. That's really cool, and it's very minimal, which I like a lot. This Ken looks super clean. There is no base cup hole. I'm not sure if they're going to offer it in the future or not. I know prototypes were made with base cup holes, so that might be something in the future we see. As far as like lunar balance goes, it feels pretty solid actually. Yeah, that's really nice. I'm not super into playing natty kendamas, but this Tama is really nice. If you're gonna play with a natty kendama, you really want a raw ash. This thing feels really good, and the ash grain is just, it just pops, and it's really rough. This almost feels like sandpaper. when you go for a lunar or a lighthouse or whatever, that ash is just gonna grip onto that cup. And I'm not saying that this grain is gonna act like a sticky paint. It's not, but it does offer some grip. So I think anyone that can do like a lunar or a lighthouse or whatever can still easily get one with this. But if you're still sort of learning these tricks, I would probably not recommend going with a natty kendama. I don't know really why you would anyway, especially at this price point. Go get like a Sweets, I don't know, radar or a Kusa half split. Hey, last video, check that out. I just did a review on those. But yeah, so I would probably stay away from a natty tama and get something with sticky paint. Okay, so let's compare this to the GT-1 shape, which I didn't prepare for, but it's over here. Okay, here's my GT-1. This is a walnut GT-1 that I got. This was actually one of my first kendamas. Not first, this is probably my 5th kendama. But I mean, relative to now, one of my first. And when this came out, I will say this was the best looking kendama I think I'd ever seen. But we're looking at the shape, not the design. Although, Grain Theory, if you're watching, which I'm sure someone is, you know, you should bring this design back, but with the GT-2. I would love it, and probably buy 4. You can see here, putting them side by side, there's definitely a size difference. It's pretty noticeable. If we look at the cups, the GT-1 small cup actually fits inside of the GT-2 small cup. And if we turn them around, it's not as big of a difference actually on the big cup. And then base cup, same thing, definitely a bump up in the GT2, which is what you want to see, but it's nothing crazy. Like, these cups aren't massive, but I like that, and it definitely fits with Grain Theory. Like, we have other super large Kens. The Lotus is like the biggest in the game, but also like the No Jumper 2 shape, Sleigh Dog V2. I'm gonna unbox the Quill V3, which I think has pretty big cups, probably in my next video actually. So some companies are offering the big cup kendamas, which are cool. But I'm really glad Grain Theory didn't go that route, because that's not them. This really does feel like a proper successor to the GT-1. And now I think they're gonna put out other shapes that are gonna have different cups and different sizes and whatever. But as far as their standard shape, I think this is really well done. This rod is pretty wide, so gunslingers still feel pretty good. I'm terrible at gunslingers, so, you know. But still feels good. I think having these super wide stall points is awesome. It's just gonna make life really easy for stalls. Yeah, this is interesting. I don't have anything negative to say about this. Obviously the price point, it's high. That's, you know, there's no way of getting around that, and it's a thing. It's basically double the price of like 2 Sweets Pro models, so it really does have to be worth it for you to spend this kind of money for a kendama, but it seems like it's really well sorted out. There's nothing that really seems off to me, which is kind of crazy. I really don't have much to complain about. Actually anything, except the price point. I know my last Grain Theory video didn't go so well on the Stod mod. I wasn't a huge fan of it. I'm not saying this in a bad way, well, kind of. Shit. But big fan of this guy. This is really something special, and I think they did put a lot of effort into this, making it the successor to the GT-1. There had to have been like a lot of thought, and they definitely did it, and I think this really is a great shape. That might last as long as the GT-1 did. I feel like this is kind of weird though. I feel like I can't end a review like this. So I'm gonna play it tomorrow and give you some first impressions and thoughts after that. So I know I said I would play with this tomorrow, I think, in the video where I left off, but it did give me a lot more time to play with this kendama, and now I can give you my thoughts on it. So the GT-2 is very, very unique. It feels like no other dama I've played, and I think that a lot of people sort of, I don't know, who want to experience something new in kendama, who've you know, maybe gotten the same shape over and over again and want to try something new, this is probably your answer. Everything I mentioned in the review before this totally holds true. 2 things I want to talk about though. One is the stall points. I was right. It's amazing for stalls. I am not the best with stall tricks, and I was able to level up and unlock so many new tricks. It just like kind of feels effortless. Like, I don't know. There are so many stalls that I probably shouldn't have landed that I have just because of this Ken. So that's awesome. The one negative I kind of found, and I won't even say it's a negative, juggling feels kind of weird with this. With singles, it's not that bad, but when you do like trips, it starts to feel kind of weird. And I think this is honestly mostly just me. It's like a personal thing. I don't think most of you will experience this, but it kind of feels like it's not consistent, if that makes sense. The swoop is great because it gives you like some grip to kind of press into, you know, when you like flip it. But it feels like when you're doing trips and your like thumb lands, say compared to here, just over a little bit, just because that swoop is so drastic, you kind of have a whole different grip on the Ken. So like if you apply the same pressure and the same force in the same way that you did for the previous triple, even if your thumb's just in a slightly different place, which it usually is, it kind of comes off a little different. Honestly, overall, I can't recommend this shape enough. It's so fun to play with and very unique, which is what Grain Theory really does well. And they nailed it with this one. Yeah, I think that's kind of the whole review. I really can't wait until they drop the cheaper versions of the GT-2 that are made overseas. I think that's going to be awesome for players to get their hands on. And yeah, that about does it, guys. See you in the next one. Peace. I don't know why I still can't do these outros. Like, I've done so many fucking outros.